Welcome to the Pardes channel. Today, we explain Prophets Joshua chapter 17 in a clear and simple way, step by step. We're diving headfirst into a really fascinating case study of land division, ancient legal precedent, and some pretty raw, tough love leadership found directly in the text. If you've ever wanted to understand how real people dealt with massive, real-world logistical challenges and the intense internal conflicts that come with them thousands of years ago, well, you are absolutely in the right place. Let's get into it. So, think about this for a second. How do you actually divide a newly conquered land fairly? Imagine the absolute geopolitical headache Joshua's facing right now. The Israelites have entered the land of Canaan, the major battles are largely won, and now comes the incredibly difficult nitty-gritty task of distributing this territory to distinct tribes. And it's not empty land, right? They're facing severe technological disadvantages against the local population still living there. And to make matters worse, Joshua is dealing with constant internal complaints from his own people about who gets what. It's a classic, high-pressure leadership crucible. Now, as we read Joshua chapter 17, it's really important to remember that we aren't just reading a dry, dusty list of facts, borders, and town names. This is historical narrative. We're looking at real human behavior. We're getting a front-row seat to their successes, their pitfalls, their fears, and their bold moves. We're looking for practical life lessons about human nature and conflict resolution. It's about seeing how this ancient text maps out not just geography, but personal responsibility and sheer courage. Here is our roadmap for today's explainer. First, reading historical narrative. Second, the allotment of Manasseh. Third, daughters claim their inheritance. Fourth, the iron chariot threat. Fifth, Joseph's tribes demand more. And finally, Joshua's bold challenge. Okay, let's jump right into section 1, reading historical narrative, and make sure we ground ourselves directly in the text. We are going to walk through chapter 17, verse by verse, step by step. Why? Because we want to extract the simple, direct lessons about conflict resolution and human nature that apply just as much to our lives today as they did to the Israelites way back then. We're going to examine the exact events, the complaints, and the actions exactly as they unfold in the original Hebrew text. Moving to section 2, let's zoom in on the specific focus of this chapter, the allotment of Manasseh. So the crucial starting point in the first 2 verses of this chapter is understanding exactly who is getting this particular slice of land. This allotment is for the tribe of Manasseh. Now, Manasseh was Joseph's firstborn son. The text immediately highlights a guy named Machir, Manasseh's firstborn. Machir was the ancestor of the Gileadites. Now, the text explicitly tells us they received the regions of Gilead and Bashan, which, if you look at a map, are east of the Jordan River, and they got it because they were great soldiers. Why does that detail matter? Well, the eastern side of the Jordan was much more exposed to foreign invaders. It wasn't the safe interior. It required tough, battle-hardened clans to hold that frontier. Machir's descendants had proven their military prowess, so they were granted this difficult but expansive eastern territory. But what about the rest of Manasseh's descendants? You've got the clans of Abiezer, Helek, Azriel, Shechem, Hefer, and Shemida. These remaining male clans needed their land on the western side of the Jordan, right inside the mainland of Canaan. This entirely sets the stage for how the rest of this western land is going to be chopped up among these families. Right, let's move to section 3. Daughters claim their inheritance. This brings us to verses 3 through 6. And I gotta tell you, this is honestly one of the most fascinating legal moments in the entire ancient text. Let's trace this specific family tree down from Manasseh so we know who we're talking about. You have Manasseh, who had Machir, who had Gilead, who had Hefer, who had a son named Zelophehad. Now, verse 3 throws a massive curveball for this time period. Zelophehad died, but he had no sons. He only had daughters. Now, we have to put ourselves in the shoes of the ancient Near East. In that strictly patriarchal society, property and land were passed down almost exclusively through male heirs. That was the system used to keep the land within the specific tribal clan. Without sons, Zelophehad's family name and his property were at risk of just completely disappearing, gone. What makes this whole narrative so remarkable is just how incredibly rare it was in the ancient world for women's inheritance to even be brought up for discussion, let alone formalized in a high-stakes legal text. The absolute, unquestioned norm was that women did not inherit land, period. But Zelophehad had 5 daughters, and the text actually names them individually, honoring their legacy and their courage. Their names are Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. And these 5 women, they were not about to just sit back and watch their father's legacy be erased from history. They decided to proactively challenge the entire status quo regarding property rights. Just look at their bold approach in verse 4. They went directly to the top brass. They went to Eleazar the priest, Joshua the son of Nun, and the tribal leaders. And they didn't go in there just asking for a polite favor. No, they brought a legal petition. They stood there and said, "The Lord commanded Moses to give us an inheritance among our brothers." You see, they are referring to a slightly earlier ruling where God actually agreed with them that they should inherit their father's land, provided they marry within their own tribe to keep the land secure. They advocated for themselves. They knew the law inside and out, and they respectfully, but firmly, demanded what was rightfully theirs. And the result? Joshua listened. He followed the command and gave them an inheritance right alongside their uncles. And as a direct result of their proactive legal petition, verse 5 tells us that Manasseh's share on the west side of the Jordan ended up consisting of exactly 10 tracts of land. This is the actual math of their success right here. Remember those 6 male clans we mentioned earlier? Well, you take those 6 minus Heifer, because his line went to Zelophehad, which leaves 5. Plus, you add these 5 daughters who now have their own standing. Because these women spoke up, they received their portions, and the total tracts on the western side reached exactly 10. It's such a powerful, timeless lesson in stepping up and advocating for what is just. Their bravery quite literally reshaped the geographical map of the Israelite nation. Let's transition over to section 4, because now we have to contrast the daughters' incredible proactive success with the broader tribe's military struggles. So, verses 7 through 13 map out the highly specific borders of Manasseh's territory. And we really need to walk through this geography to understand the tough situation they were in. Verse 7 starts by defining the border of Manasseh all the way from Asher to Mikmatath, which is east of Shechem. Then the border goes southward toward the inhabitants of En Tappuah. Verse 8 clarifies a tricky little detail. While the land of Tappuah belonged to Manasseh, the actual town of Tappuah, sitting right on the border, that belonged to the tribe of Ephraim. Then, in verse 9, the border drops down to the brook of Kana. The cities south of the brook belonged to Ephraim, even though geographically they were mixed among the cities of Manasseh. It's a bit of a jigsaw puzzle. Manasseh's border was on the north side of the brook, ending all the way at the Mediterranean Sea. Verse 10 summarizes it nicely. The land to the south was Ephraim's, the land to the north was Manasseh's, with the sea as their western border. They bumped up against the tribe of Asher on the north and Issachar on the east. But then verse 11 gets incredibly detailed. It says that within the territories of Issachar and Asher, Manasseh was given specific, highly strategic towns. We're talking places like Bashan, Ibleam, Dor, Endor, Tanakh, and Megiddo, along with all their surrounding settlements. Now, this looks absolutely amazing on paper, right? They have vast borders, they have key, wealthy cities, but there's a really harsh geopolitical reality that hits in verses 12 and 13. Just because Manasseh was allotted this land on Joshua's map didn't mean they actually controlled it on the ground. The text explicitly states that the Manassites were not able to occupy these towns. Why? Because the Canaanites were absolutely determined to stay in that region. They wouldn't budge. Later on, verse 13 notes that when the Israelites eventually grew stronger, they subjected the Canaanites to forced labor, but they failed to drive them out completely as they were originally commanded to do. So you have to ask, why couldn't they drive them out right away? Verse 16 reveals the major technological barrier the Israelites were facing. The Canaanites living in the Valley Plains possessed highly advanced military technology for that era, iron chariots. I want you to imagine facing modern-day impenetrable armored tanks when literally all you have is basic light infantry weapons. For an Israelite infantry army that had just come out of the desert, the idea of facing iron chariots in a wide-open valley was absolutely terrifying. These machines of war would just tear right through foot soldiers on flat ground. And because of this stark, paralyzing fear, the Israelites stayed largely confined to the rough, forested hill country, places where those heavy, clumsy chariots couldn't operate. And that tension brings us to section 5, and the real climax of the chapter, a major conflict in leadership. In verse 14, the people of Joseph, meaning the massive combined tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh, come directly to Joshua to complain. They say, "Why have you given us only one allotment and one portion for an inheritance? We are a numerous people, and the Lord has blessed us abundantly." Basically, they are looking at their massive population, and then they are looking at the relatively small amount of safe, easy hill country they currently control, and they feel entitled to more free land. They want Joshua to just hand them another easy allotment. They don't want to go down and fight those terrifying chariots in the valley, so they want Joshua, their leader, to just draw new lines on the map and give them land that is already safe and cleared. It's a classic case of wanting the reward without doing the hard work. Let's move to our final section, Joshua's bold challenge. This is where we see his brilliant response to their grievance in verses 15 through 18. Joshua does not coddle them, not even a little bit. He gives them pure, tough love leadership. In verse 15, he responds, "If you are so numerous, and if the hill country of Ephraim is too small for you, go up into the forest and clear land for yourselves there in the land of the Perizzites and Rephaites." It's absolutely brilliant. He takes their exact own argument and flips it right back on them. He's saying, "Oh, you say you're a great and numerous people? Great, prove it. Put that massive manpower to use. Go do the hard, grueling work of clearing the dense forests to make room for yourselves." Well, the tribes immediately push back with an excuse in verse 16. They whine, basically saying, "The hills aren't enough for us, and we definitely can't go into the valleys because of those terrifying iron chariots." But Joshua holds the line. He doesn't back down. In verses 17 and 18, he issues a final non-negotiable command. "You are a great people and have great power. You will not have only one allotment. The forested hill country will be yours. Clear it. And you shall drive out the Canaanites, even though they have iron chariots and even though they are strong." Notice what Joshua is doing here. He is not just giving them a difficult task. He is fundamentally empowering them. He is reminding them that they actually are strong enough to defeat those iron chariots if they would just stop complaining, trust in their strength, and try. He shifts the burden of responsibility completely back onto their shoulders, essentially telling them that a true inheritance isn't just something handed out on a silver platter. It is something that must be built, cleared, and fought for. So to quickly recap exactly where we've been in this chapter, we watched Manasseh's land get divided based on military prowess and strategic need. We saw 5 remarkable daughters bravely petition the law to secure their future against seemingly impossible cultural odds. We mapped out precise, complicated tribal borders, and we witnessed Joshua brilliantly handle a massive, entitled tribe that was complaining about iron chariots. And really, that brings us to the profound practical life lesson of Joshua chapter 17. Look at the stark, undeniable contrast we just saw in the text. On one hand, you have the 5 daughters of Zelophehad. They faced a massive systemic disadvantage, but they proactively and courageously petitioned for what was right, and they won their inheritance. On the exact other hand, you have the massive, powerful tribes of Joseph, who complained, made excuses about iron chariots, and just waited for someone else to hand them an easy solution. Joshua's message to them is ultimately a message we can all learn from. Will you just sit around and demand a larger inheritance, or will you take the responsibility, go out and clear the forest, face your iron chariots, and build one yourself? Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.